Illinois state capital. This is your Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell. In just a little more than 2 weeks, recreational marijuana will be for sale and legal here in Illinois. Earlier this week, Governor J.B. Pritzker and Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx held a meeting and went into court together as they watched the first of many people who have low-level cannabis convictions see their records expunged, a first step on their way to a fresh start.
As a prosecutor who's previously prosecuted these cases, we must own our role in the harm that we have caused, and particularly to communities of color.
A criminal record carries with it more than stigma. It prevents people from being considered for job opportunities. We will never be able to fully remedy the depth of the unfairness and the damage that it's visited upon so many families. But we can govern our state with the courage to admit the mistakes of our past.
And with the rollout of recreational marijuana well on its way, just about to begin here in Illinois, law enforcement also had significant concerns, specifically about cannabis canines, or drug-sniffing dogs who had been trained to sniff out marijuana. But they are also warning any of you who do buy legal amounts of recreational marijuana, there are still strict rules in place about how you can and cannot transport the marijuana with you as you drive from point A to point B. Under the law, recreational marijuana can only be transported in an odor-proof container, and if you follow the law enforcement tells us you won't have any problems.
It's obviously, if it's odor-proof, then our canines should not be able to smell it. And so if our canines are alerting on a vehicle, then that will mean that it's not in compliance of the law.
And alongside the rollout of cannabis comes the rollout of more casinos in Illinois. The Illinois Gaming Board has in its possession 5 different certifications from 5 different cities that have taken in competing bids and applications from developers and operators who want to build casinos in their home city. One of them in Rockford came under scrutiny earlier this week as we learned that the business associates and campaign donors of State Senator Dave Severson, the Republican who helped to write the gaming bill, just so happened to be the investor group that won the city of Rockford's approval. Senator Severson tells us that he was not a paid lobbyist and was not lobbying, but rather advocating when he reached out directly to county officials in Winnebago County. We went and talked to one of the developers there who feels he was jilted and that the state senator was not representing his interests.
He was competing actively against you?
I think there's a lot of language that actively showed he was.
This key piece of legislation.
Senator Dave Severson led the charge for Republicans to promote 6 new casinos, with a lot riding on the line in his hometown of Rockford.
Thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of construction.
One of those construction companies, Ringland Johnson, is owned by Brent Johnson, one of Severson's biggest campaign donors who invested in the Hard Rock Casino and is in line to win the contract to build it if the Gaming Board awards Hard Rock a license. Johnson and his trust combined to donate more than $96,000 to Severson's campaign fund. Severson's business partner, Rick Nielsen, also backed the Hard Rock bid. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame musician from Cheap Trick owns a share of the Stockholm Inn with Severson. His spouse is listed as a casino investor. Business partner with Senator Severson, or how would you describe?
He's the brains, I'm just the eye candy.
Nielsen lobbied state lawmakers to give Rockford a casino, and when they did, Severson returned home to start working local officials. At a county meeting in August, Severson passed out copies of this map he had printed off the internet. It included handwritten notes as evidence the county should support the casino bid nearest the highway that his donors and partners had already invested in.
The problem of going into downtown locations, despite what people would like or wish it to be, they're not economic generators. When a casino comes into an area, people go there, they stay there, they shop in this casino, they eat in the casino, and the restaurants and shops around it get devastated. And I know you've seen pictures, every single casino in Illinois, look at the economic development around it, you see that it doesn't. It actually hurts economic development.
Ron Kluwer applied to put a casino here on riverfront property adjacent to the downtown area. The city denied his application.
The timeline was aggressive.
He feels the city set the bar too high, sped the process up, effectively sidelined competition, and gave a clear advantage to insiders connected to Severson, who already knew the law inside and out.
He clearly is lobbying. He was absolutely lobbying.
Had Rockford used the same standards as other cities approved for a casino in Illinois, Kluwer predicts his bid would have stood a chance before the gaming board.
Dave works to move an agenda. I'm not exactly sure whose interests those are. I don't believe he represents me and my interests now.
How confident are you that you could have pulled it off?
Oh, I know he could have pulled it off.
What we still don't know, are there mystery investors hidden behind trusts who stand to profit on the casino?
All the investors should be publicly available.
The city did publish a list of investors, but out of 4 trusts, only the names of the trustees, not the beneficiaries, are public.
Taxpayers should be able to know who they are. Trust or no trust, they knew when they set that up what was the effect of that would be.
Lawyers for the city of Rockford did tell us they did not think that Ron Kluwer or Gorman Casino's application was complete or as thoroughly vetted as the winning bid, as the one that got the city's approval. The gaming board has still yet to award it a license. Governor Pritzker opened up his checkbook and spent big earlier this week in his push to promote the progressive income tax on the ballot in 2020. The governor dropped $5 million into his new campaign fund that's dedicated solely to convincing voters to vote yes on the 2020 ballot question to approve that tax in the land of Lincoln. Governor Pritzker did, of course, also spend a record $166.5 million to get the job in his campaign in 2018. Now he's spending that extra money to try and get his job done. That $5 million check will go into many initiatives to buy ads and promote public messaging. It's called Vote Yes for Fairness, the campaign committee. It's reserved only for that cause and cannot be used like some other dark money groups to funnel money to candidates or other campaigns. We talked to the head of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, Todd Meisch, who plans to join us in the coming weeks. He said this progressive tax is not polling well, and when he saw Governor Pritzker cut a check for $5 million, he thought that was evidence the governor is concerned this might fail when voters weigh in. And State Senator and Democrat Andy Manar, who chairs a budget committee in the Senate, told us what he thinks could happen and what is at stake if this progressive income tax fails in 2020.
What is at stake? So clearly, if we don't have some, what I would describe as structural change to our tax code, we're going to be doing the same thing that we've been doing for years. I think it'll be a repeat of 4 years under Governor Rauner with budgets.
When we come back, a look at the story the nation is watching all week, the push for impeachment in Congress and how Illinois' members of Congress responded to those calls. That's next. Stick around.
Thousands of memories will be placed on that end table. So choose one that will hold those memories longer. When you buy right, it stays right. Year after year, into the next generation. Wright's Furniture and Flooring, making you right at home.
Hi, I'm Gary Knight from Carmack Car Capital, where we're crushing it. We're crushing the competition with low prices, lowest interest rates, and we'll pay you top dollar for your trade.
Crush it with our huge selection of Hondas and Hyundais, plus a great selection of pre-owned.
Now is the time for you to get crushing it at Carmack Car Capital in Danville.
When Marshall Elson started the business in 1950, he would clean out the truck and deliver furniture on the weekends. That commitment to service has carried our business for 3 generations. Elson Sanitary now offers convenient roll-off dumpster service. Visit us online to learn more.
You've pulled overtime and worked weekends. She's cared and looked after you. Life is good. She always has your back. The holidays are a perfect time to say and show your love with diamonds. MJ Reed Jewelers, Old Farm Shops, Champaign.
Check everything off your gift list this year with a quick trip to Hood's Ace Hardware in Gibson City, celebrating more than 60 years serving the community. They have the perfect gifts and large selection of unique decor to make your home merry and bright. If you need to spruce up your house before friends and family arrive, Hood's Ace Hardware has paint and tools too. This year, be the best Santa's helper you can be with a visit to Hood's Ace Hardware.
Downtown Gibson City is your home for the holidays.
Welcome to the First Presbyterian Church in Gibson City, where we inspire people to grow deeper in their relationship to Christ. Join us for services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Then stay for cookies, coffee, and conversation. Discover our warm, caring atmosphere. And if you need a ride, we'll gladly pick you up. We welcome you to come as you are to worship the risen Lord Jesus Christ at the First Presbyterian Church.
Downtown Gibson City is your home for the holidays.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
This week, House Democrats introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump, alleging that he obstructed Congress and abused his power. We caught up with members of Congress from Illinois to get their reaction to that historic moment.
When I think about impeachment, it's really the nuclear option. It should be a last resort in our Constitution. And as a former federal prosecutor, I've seen nothing in the facts and evidence that lead me to believe that we ought to be engaged in impeachment. So I think it's sad for our country that we're going down this path. I didn't like the way the process was conducted here. It was very partisan. And this is such a high threshold. When you look at impeachment, it should be treasonous activity, high criminal activity, and you're nullifying an election. This is not the time to be nullifying an election.
More than anything, we've got to make sure that our democracy is safe and sound, and that we understand that whether you're the President of the United States, a U.S. Senator, a member of Congress, that nobody, and I do mean nobody, is above the law. I don't think there's anybody who's watching this program right now who could defy a subpoena, or who can say, you know, I'm not going to get in front of a courtroom or a judge or Congress if you are subpoenaed to do so.
And we pick up now with Senate Democrat Tammy Duckworth from Illinois. Senator, always a pleasure having you with us. Well, let's start first with the news the nation is watching. The House is preparing to send articles of impeachment to the Senate, where you would essentially be a juror in that trial, the president on trial for abusing his power and obstructing Congress. First of all, have you seen enough evidence right now to vote to impeach and remove President Trump from office?
No, I haven't even read the articles yet, so I'm looking to get a copy of those here shortly as I head back to my office. We've been on the floor voting right now. So I'll take a look at the articles, and then, of course, there will be a trial. So I will save my judgment until I hear the case presented to the United States Senate.
Also in the House this week, Speaker Pelosi announced that House Democrats have reached a deal with the Trump administration on the USMCA, the Mexico-Canada Agreement, or NAFTA 2.0. Are you comfortable and confident right now that the USMCA will not cost Americans jobs?
Well, I have got to look at it. Again, I have not seen the details of it. It does look very promising, and let me tell you, for our farmers, for our manufacturers, we really do need some sort of a deal that will allow us to conduct trade with our neighbors, but also at the same time protect American industry and American agriculture. So if there is a real deal that everyone can agree to, then I'm very much looking forward to being able to support it. But I'm going to withhold a little bit of judgment until I've had a chance to actually go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that it's not going to cost American jobs, and in fact, it's going to boost American production, American exports, and really, you know, something that we desperately need, especially for our agricultural sector.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also said this week that any vote in the Senate on the USMCA, on that pivotal trade deal, would likely come after a vote on impeachment. I wonder how you see the politics of that timing, of that decision there. Does it become more difficult or complicated for you or other Democrats to explain to voters back home why you voted to impeach a president but enact his policies?
Well, I've continued to work with this administration and my colleagues across the aisle, regardless of everything that's been going on. In fact, I've actually been able to pass several good pieces of legislation, not the least of which we got the race riot site in Springfield designated a national monument. All of these things I've been able to do in a bipartisan way. So I'm just going to keep doing the people's work. The people of Illinois sent me here to Washington to do the job of serving them and you know, bringing economic development and looking out for their best interests, and I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm not going to let the impeachment inquiry and the impeachment articles get in the way of trying to get something done for the American public and for our economy. I just wish that Leader McConnell would allow us to vote on USMCA before the impeachment, because I think our agricultural sector and our manufacturing sector desperately needs some sort of a win right now, and I'd rather get moving on that first.
And Senator, I saw that you spent Veterans Day this year down in Tijuana, Mexico, with some veterans who had been deported. One of them there, Miguel Perez, is now back home, now a U.S. citizen, and gets to spend this holiday season with his family. How many more American veterans like Miguel are there who have been deported, and what is your goal in working on and reaching out to them?
Well, I saw a couple dozen there in Tijuana. I will tell you that there are hundreds of them all around the world. And I even met veterans. I met one gentleman who served, had an honorable discharge. He served us honorably, wore the uniform, took on the challenges of serving our nation, and then he was deported over a DUI. Now, DUI is a very serious offense, but really he should have been given a chance to pay his debt and then be allowed to continue to work towards getting his citizenship. And there's so many of these stories over there. I met one Korean War veteran who is in the middle of cancer treatment, and we deported him without any humanitarian consideration for his health condition. So there's a lot that needs to be done. I think that those who have not committed a violent crime, those who, if they've committed a crime, it's a nonviolent one, those who've served, who have at least an other than honorable discharge or higher, should be given a chance to be able to pay their debt to society and work their way back towards a green card and perhaps eventually citizenship. But just to deport veterans after they've worn the uniform for this great nation and gone and been deployed and suffered hardship for us is not the American thing to do.
All right, Senator, I'm told that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
When we come back, our conversation with someone who wants to run for Congress as a Republican to replace John Shimkus. We talked to Vermilion County Treasurer Darren Duncan. We'll be right back.
Come enjoy a wonderful experience at PVP. All of our breads and cakes are made with the freshest, healthiest ingredients. Whether it's sweet or savory you're craving, we have something to satisfy your taste. And try our new line of fresh made-to-order teas at PVP Bakery on Green Street.
Keep on track when winter weather hits. On Track Trucking Inc. will help you out. No job is too large or too small. Need a tow? From big rigs to your family car, we'll keep you safe all year long. Specializing in oversized equipment hauling across the country or towing in town. On Track Trucking Inc. wishes you a safe and happy holiday season.
Downtown Gibson City is your home for the holidays.
Satisfy your sweet tooth at Black & White's Confections in Gibson City. We've got the goods, handmade fresh in store from traditional recipes and never any preservatives. Our decadent sweets will have you coming back for more. Book your holiday orders early before they all disappear. Be sure to stop in and see our new soda fountain with specialty sodas, iced coffees, hot cider, and chocolates. Black & White's Confections in Gibson City.
Downtown Gibson City is your home for the holidays.
This is about preventing a potentially disastrous outcome from occurring next year.
Now it's crystal clear. Their partisan impeachment is a politically motivated charade. Thankfully, Congressman Rodney Davis believes the voters should be the ones deciding elections. He's focusing on the issues that matter, making job training more accessible, supporting our veterans, and being a strong voice for our farmers. Call Rodney Davis. Thank him for standing against impeachment and focusing on the issues that matter to us.
A Quilting Bee carries over 6,000 bolts of fabric. You're guaranteed to find whatever it is you're looking for. With a great selection of books, patterns, and kits, you'll have everything you need from start to finish. A Quilting Bee, 406 East Main Street in Mahomet.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
He's the longest tenured Republican in Congress from Illinois. But next November, you will not see Congressman John Shimkus' name on a ballot. He's stepping away from Congress, opening up a void in his place. That's invited a number of Republicans and a few Democrats to try and jump in this race in 2020 to go to Congress for this next term. One of those candidates joins me now. That's Darren Duncan, the treasurer at Vermilion County. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So a lot of voters are wanting to get to know who the candidates are in this race. You've introduced yourself with sort of a campaign ad so far that talks about who you are. Give us, I guess, a little bit of that. Why did you decide to get into this race? And I guess I'll add a little bit of context. A lot of people took a look at it and thought, I just don't know. There was a lot of people saying we might jump in. They didn't. Why did you?
I think there's probably the fog of what's going on within the redistricting that may most likely occur after the 2020 census, so 2020 to 2022 would be one reason why a lot of people were stepping back. And
it scared people off?
Yeah, I think it could. Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's some people that are in positions now where they're doing things and they want to be able to continue that work if they had run for this seat, and who knows what redistricting is going to do. They potentially would not be able to continue to serve, and they wanted to maintain their service where they're at least.
In your launch video, you did mention, you said here on the program today that you had an illness. You said it was colon cancer.
Sure.
A cancer survivor now. Mm-hmm. How does that inform your view of the American healthcare debate? And would you ever support any measure that might weaken protections for people who are insured to protect pre-existing conditions?
Pre-existing conditions I would not want to take away. I mean, I would want people with pre-existing conditions to be taken care of. My general thought on healthcare is that we live in the greatest country in the world. We have a lot of resources in this country, and that no one, for lack of money, should be denied good, adequate health care.
Bernie Sanders has said all those same things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how to pay for it, and I won't.
Is that where you disagree with Senator Sanders?
Yes. He wants the government to control everything.
He wants universal health care, or Medicare for all, as it's called. What's your vision of
I believe Richard Nixon was actually the first president to ever suggest along these lines that people should get good health care, and so a Republican president from a long time ago initiated that idea. So I don't think it belongs to any one party. I think all Americans can agree that we don't want our neighbor to not get adequate health care. I'm not sure how we got to this point where it's businesses, that are responsible for paying for it.
Are you comfortable with that?
The businesses?
The current structure?
No. In my own case, so I was a farmer before I was county treasurer. We had to have our own private health insurance, and it was, I think, reasonable back in the day, but after the Affordable Health Care Act was initiated, those premiums doubled, tripled, quadrupled. I mean, it became quite a burden on our family.
Is that the part that makes you uncomfortable with the structure? Is the profit that insurance companies can make on a person's plight?
Yeah, not necessarily on that. I think, I'm not against anybody making money in what they're doing, and I believe very much in private enterprise.
So how would you change this?
Well, we haven't got into those details yet. I've been focused on being a farmer and county treasurer, so I would want to reach out and to get some leaders in all aspects of healthcare and talk to them about what their ideas are. I think that's how we start this conversation, for me is, and I know they've been having it for a while, I don't think it's working for most Americans. So I think we need to continue talking about it.
Interesting. In your video, you also said that a conservative agenda like the one President Trump has been advancing is one I would fully support. Fully? And does that apply to foreign and domestic policy?
Well, I am far from an expert on foreign policy. Again, an American Illinois farmer is not a foreign policy expert, so I'm not even going to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. But on issues that I think most of us Americans or Illinoisans can have some strong opinions and thoughts on. Immigration would be one of them. That's a big topic that's been, discussed. I would say legal immigration. I'm all for it. All of us, for the most part, have come from somewhere else, whether it's first generation or many generations ago. My ancestors came a couple centuries ago. So we've all immigrated. We want to, and we welcome that. I, as a Republican, would tell you that I am 100% in favor of people from other lands coming here. We just need a safe and secure process for that to happen.
So that there is a bit of a conflict there then between your view and the Trump administration in reality, because under the Trump administration, the pathways to legal immigration have been constricted. Do you think that that's a good policy to make it harder for people to immigrate here legally?
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think the president's in favor of, and I shouldn't speak for the president. I'm not his spokesperson.
Those are the policies.
But my view is that the president's been in favor of immigration. He just wants to see it done in a safe and secure manner.
But his administration is constricting the legal ways in which people can immigrate to this country. It's getting harder and harder to get in. That's the effect that's happening.
I don't know that.
Should that continue?
If that is happening, it shouldn't. But I don't think that that is the view. I don't agree with that.
Okay, those are the facts.
Okay.
But the Department of Homeland Security, the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement have made a very, very loud proclamation, even going into the 2018 election, that they were going to make it harder to legally get into this country through a lot of different means, including separating families at the border and pausing and saying, whoa, whoa, pump the brakes. You're saying that didn't happen?
I don't believe that that's the intent of the president or immigration services.
So you're giving him benefit of the doubt.
If they're getting
intent, but it's the effect.
If they're getting into wanting to make sure that we screen thoroughly people, then yes, yeah, if that's their intent. But you're on a different level on this than I am, and it's your daily job, and I understand that you are reading all those releases and asking the questions. We will get there, but I'm here to tell you that I support legal immigration, but I want to make sure that it's, and if people want to come to this country and they will go through the legal process, and it should be rigorous. Being a United States citizen, and hopefully that's what their intent is, means something, and it should continue to mean something. So let's make sure people are serious about their intentions here.
And thank you for sharing some of those thoughts and ideas with us at this early stage. We look forward to checking back in with you in your campaign as these ideas evolve and as the campaign itself gets closer and closer to that election day. Darren Duncan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We're back in a moment.
You're already a caregiver. You just don't know it yet. At Home Instead, we believe in offering competitive pay and benefits, a schedule that fits your life, and the opportunity for a career driven by passion.
Now hiring in Danville.
At Osling & Associates, we handle bankruptcy and only bankruptcy. When you need help, call Osling & Associates. There's only a $700 fee for single filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy questions? Visit our website at bcyhelp.com. An emergency bankruptcy can stop foreclosures, judgments, repossessions, utility shutoffs, and court proceedings. Call Osling & Associates with 20 Illinois offices to serve you. Call Osling & Associates now and stop the collection calls.
During the holiday sale at Furniture Row, I could show you one sofa, one table, even just one bed. But then you'd miss out on the hundreds of other sofas, tables, beds, mattresses, and accessories that make up Furniture Row's incredible selection and guaranteed lowest prices.
And right now, you can finance your new room starting as low as $9 a month.
That's 5 years, no interest financing. Shop the holiday sale today, only at Furniture Row.
Check everything off your gift list this year with a quick trip to Hood's Ace Hardware in Gibson City, celebrating more than 60 years serving the community. They have the perfect gifts and large selection of unique decor to make your home merry and bright. If you need to spruce up your house before friends and family arrive, Hood's Ace Hardware has paint and tools too. This year, be the best Santa's helper you can be with a visit to Hood's Ace Hardware.
Downtown Gibson City is your home for the holidays.
Start your care with a doctor who knows that beginnings matter. Dr. Christina Dawkins is now accepting new patients for family medicine and maternity care at the Paxton Clinic in downtown Paxton. Call 217-379-4864 to make an appointment today.
And that does it for us from the State House for now. We do hope you'll join us again next week. And as always, you can catch our full extended conversations up on our website. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell. Stay connected to the Capitol all week. Follow us on Twitter at CapConnectIL or watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA 3. You can also find us on Facebook or WCIA.com.